Let's talk about computational analysis.
Yeah, that's
So,
another fun thing. In my research project, what we try to do is to, because this early type of counterpoint, there are a lot of things we do not understand. And we thought that a computational approach, so asking computer algorithm to do a contrapuntal analysis for us, would be able to clear up some things for us, or at least the computer would be able to do it in a much more rigorous way than we would be able to do. So what you see here is on the top line is the original Cantus upper voice of a counterpoint exercise from the treatise of this Antonius de Leno, which is, by the way, again the same area, the Veneto, around 1400. And on the very bottom, you see the tenor. So you see a voice that goes ta da da ding ta 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 re da ta ta rom ti ti ta ta ta, etc. Then the treatise of Delano gives three levels of complexity for studying counterpoint. It gives note against note counterpoint. It gives three notes against one and two notes against one. So it's like a proto-species kind of approach. And again, already around 1400. So what we've asked the computer to do is to reduce the florid counterpoint to each of these stages of diminution according to the rules of Delano himself. So you see in the second stave, it reduced it when possible to three
Mm,
notes. So you see that, for instance, the second note of the pairs of three that exist is often a dissonance because
mm,
the second note is allowed to be a passing note in the system. But you see the entire flourish of triplets in
mm.
beautiful nonupla. It gets reduced immediately to three notes.
Mm.
Then another level of reduction is again in two notes. These have to be all consonant according to the rules of Delano. So you see also that they are all consonant. And as the last stage, we ask the computer to reduce to a note against note framework.
Mm.
So it does that according to a set of established algorithmic criteria, so that we don't go in every case decide which would be the better note, but we train the computer to do it for us, and hopefully we can use it later for
Right,
other
right.
purposes. Yeah.
Um, oh, this is the other side. So, so what insights did you get from the computational analysis?
Well, one insight that we got is that cadence function is very often tied to a lower turning point of the melody in this repertoire. So if the plain chant dips to a low C, for instance, and rises again afterwards, very often in this case the composer Antonius Delano will choose to create a cadence there, and we
Mm,
quantified this, and it was like, I think, between 80 and 90% of cases, you will find an octave with a sixth proceeding in this kind of situation. And more globally, we found, in other words, that we can reduce successfully florid counterpoint to three and to two voices because these melodies resemble the original exercises he makes.
wait,
They're
what's
not.
what's the difference? So people are going to ask, is this the same as Renaissance counterpoint? What is the difference between the music of 1400 with 16th century polyphony?
Well, there are certain differences in the way that rules are interpreted. For instance, this in this time, you may very well finish a phrase on an octave and start the next phrase with another octave because they don't consider that there is counterpoint between ends and beginnings.
Okay.
Or when you think about a bit more complex textures, you think about when there are two voices that are both singing against the tenor. These two parts, let's call them cantus and contratenor, or cantus 1, cantus 2, these two parts are not themselves in counterpoint. So if there are fifths between them, that's not a problem. If there are temporarily dissonances between them, it's also not theoretically a problem. So
Wow.
it's another vision of how these rules work. But
Okay.
the idea that you teach making polyphony from note against note progression to more complex things, that is something you already see.
Yeah, so species is actually quite old then, the concept. in terms of instruction pedagogy.
I would argue that the treatise we just saw, the work I'm doing on it, the treatise of Antonius Deleno, it is the first account of something like Specious,
Mm.
because you really see an
1400.
1400. You
Wow.
see a sort of progression from the simple to the florid by means of systematic exercises in a certain number of notes.
Okay. Okay. There's another slide with computational analysis which is being
Ah, yeah,
used.
this fun also. So we, after doing the examples from the treatise, we try to also use, for instance, this Benedicamus that we already saw to analyze that, and you see that sometimes we still run into problems. For instance, between the note against note reduction doesn't work between the second and the third bar,
Yeah.
because he chose to write a parallel fifth. Why did he do it? It's an interesting question. So I asked my colleague who's doing the coding, and he said, "Yeah, but he didn't. He wanted to avoid the jump between C sharp and G."
Oh.
But you see that that was really in the actual music. So at this point, I think the algorithm is still too strict. It wants to have nice diatonic melodies, but you see that in the real music there was a nice spicy jump of a diminished fifth, and it was not a problem.
Yeah.
So we need to keep developing this algorithm in a sense that it becomes tolerant of certain characteristics of the music.
Do the ancients, do they speak of prohibitions of parallel octaves and fifths even in those older books?
Yes. So in the very beginning, let's say the entire music, or when you speak about organum, it's built on parallel fifths, fourths, and octaves. That's the way to
Oh,
create music.
okay.
For instance, you mentioned Guido. Guido explains how to do organum at the fourth below, the fifth above, and you just keep happily singing in parallels the entire time. But when you get to the period, sort of, yeah, it's shocking to many people, but it's true. And the fourth used to be consonant. That's even more
Right.
shocking. Yeah. Um, the By the time you get to the sort of the mid 14th century, these things change, because they start having this notion of counterpoint, which is regulated by rules, and also which is based mainly on contrary motion. So then
Mm.
these things get slowly outphased.
Wait, but hold on a second. A third is so nice, right? I mean, they
Yes.
I'm sure they knew about thirds. Why not use the third? Since I mean, I mean, Boethius, they all calculated these intervals, right? I mean, they know these intervals existed. Why did they say, "Ooh, third"? No, I'm going to go with a fourth. I'm going to go with a fifth here. Why no third until like much later?
But thirds are there, and really for the period that I researched, the 14th and early 15th century, thirds are an integral part already of the musical grammar.
Oh, okay,
But
okay.
I think what the problem you have before is that a large part of musical practice is maybe invisible, and the part that survives needs to sort of die hard stick to Pythagorean reasoning. And as you know,
Mm,
the major third, for instance, doesn't have a very nice
mm.
ratio in,
Right, right.
in in on the monochord. So it is theoretically not so pretty
Yeah.
if your understanding of music is very mathematical and tied to
Yes.
measurements on the monochord. But
Yeah.
I think that from the time we have a actual reliable record of written polyphony, the thirds are always part of it, even in the Notre Dame period.
Interesting. And what when is the Notre Dame period?
Oh, that's 13th century. Yeah,
Wow.
the repertoire of
13th
Notre Dame de
century.
Paris. Yeah, so
Wow.
it is. I
Okay.
mean, there is a lot of
Mm.
polyphony from the Middle Ages. Yeah.